This is how I make watercolors out of dirt. To start, you'll need a sandwich bag size amount of dirt, a large bowl or vase, a fine mesh sieve, a plate, palette knife, tempered glass sheet, muller, paint container, and a binder of some sort. Personally, I'm using a gum arabic based watercolor binder. First, we need to separate large debris from the small particles in the dirt that will eventually become your pigment. Place your vase or bowl on top of your workspace to collect the pigment water. We'll add a little bit of dirt into the mesh and slowly pour water over it and into the bowl or vase while stirring. Only the finest particles will be able to pass through the mesh, guaranteeing that your paint will be smooth and not gritty or chunky. Replace the dirt in the mesh with fresh dirt after 3 water rinse cycles. When I finished the rinsing cycle, I transferred the pigment water into a vase to let it settle for a few days. Once your pigment has settled and the water's not so murky, carefully pour off the excess water without pouring out any of the pigment. This should leave you with a fully processed pigment that you can then spoon onto a plate and allow to dry overnight. When your pigment is fully dry, you should be able to crumble it pretty easily in your fingers and it'll leave a powdery residue. At this point, you'll need your palette knife, tempered glass plate, muller, and binder. Start by placing a small portion of the dry pigment onto the glass sheet. I like to crunch mine up with my palette knife so it's a little bit easier to mix once I add my binder. Adding a few drops of binder at a time, I'll begin mixing that into my pigment. If it's too dry, you can add a little bit more binder or a few drops of water. Once you have a loose paste formed, you can begin mulling. Mulling forces binder in between each particle of pigment and ensures that it is fully combined. I usually mull for about 5 or so minutes, sometimes longer if the pigment is especially hydrophobic. For technique, I usually mull in circles and use my palette knife to clean up the edges if it's too close to the sides. Once your mixture looks pretty even, all that's left to do is add it to a container. If you used a watercolor binder like me, I would recommend that you allow it to air dry for at least a week to prevent any mold growth. Making your own paints is such a fun and unique experience that I really recommend, especially if you're into nature or sustainability. So,